3 years together, and suddenly I needed to be fixed. All because a stranger convinced her that being content was the same as settling for less.
Hey there, I'm Kayla. My life was pretty good. Not amazing, not terrible, just good. Jacob and I had been together for 3 years, living together for the last year and a half, and we had our routine down. He'd make coffee in the morning while I got ready for work. We'd watch Netflix most nights, order takeout way too often, and spend weekends doing absolutely nothing productive. It was comfortable. Safe. But comfortable can start to feel like a cage when you're scrolling through Instagram at 11 p.m. wondering what the hell you're doing with your life. That's exactly what I was doing when I saw Emma's latest post. My sister, 2 years older and apparently 2 years ahead in every possible way, standing in front of some glass office building in a blazer. The caption was something about grateful for the journey and stepping into her power, the kind of stuff that usually made me roll my eyes. But this time it hit different. Because while she was stepping into her power, I was stepping into my pajamas to binge-watch reality TV for the 4th night in a row. We had dinner the following Sunday at Mom's house, and I couldn't stop staring at Emma. She looked, I don't know, shinier, more put together. She was talking about her promotion, her new apartment, some weekend retreat she'd been to. Meanwhile, I was mentally calculating how many days it had been since I'd worn real pants. When we were doing dishes together, I finally asked what her secret was. Emma laughed, but not in a mean way, and told me she'd started working with a life coach a few months ago. Sarah Martinez. She admitted it sounded cheesy, but said Sarah had actually helped her get clearer on what she wanted. A life coach. I'd always thought those were for people with too much money and too much time. But looking at Emma, seeing how confident she seemed, how intentional everything felt, maybe I was the one who had it wrong. Emma explained they talked about everything, career stuff, mostly, but also habits, relationships, where she wanted to be in 5 years. She said Sarah helped her realize she was just drifting through her 20s without any real direction. Drifting. That word stuck with me for days. Because wasn't that exactly what I was doing? Showing up to my marketing coordinator job, doing the bare minimum, coming home to Jacob repeat. When was the last time I'd felt excited about anything? When was the last time I'd even thought about where I wanted to be in 5 years? I made the appointment with Sarah the next week. Her office was nothing like I'd expected. No crystals or motivational posters. Just a normal office with a normal woman who asked normal questions. What did I want to change? What was working in my life? What wasn't? I told her I felt stuck, like I was watching everyone else move forward while I was just here. Sarah nodded like she'd heard this 1,000 times before and suggested we start small. What would make me feel more energized on a daily basis? We talked about morning routines, about meal prepping instead of grabbing fast food, about setting boundaries at work instead of saying yes to everything. Nothing revolutionary, just basic stuff that somehow felt revolutionary when someone was helping you see it clearly. I left that first session feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Motivated. Like I had permission to want more, to try harder, to actually give a damn about my own life. The changes started small. I bought a coffee maker so I could stop spending $15 a day at Starbucks. Started going to bed earlier so I could wake up earlier. Meal prepped on Sundays. Jacob thought it was great. He kept saying how proud he was of me for taking charge of things. But after a few weeks, Sarah started asking bigger questions. About my relationships, my social circle, my future plans. Had Jacob and I talked about marriage, kids, where we wanted to live, what we wanted our life to look like in 10 years. The honest answer was no, we hadn't really talked about any of that. We just existed together, day by day, assuming everything would work itself out. And for the first time, that started to feel like a problem.
Hey, this is Jacob. I'll be honest, I was happy for Kayla when she started working with that life coach. She'd been in a funk for months, complaining about work, scrolling through her phone every night, like she was searching for something she couldn't find. So when she came home all excited about making changes, I thought it was great. Finally, something had lit a fire under her. The first few weeks were actually pretty cool. She started waking up at 6 instead of hitting snooze until the last possible second. Made these elaborate smoothie bowls for breakfast instead of grabbing a granola bar on her way out the door. Came home from work with actual energy instead of collapsing on the couch immediately. I mean, who was I to complain about my girlfriend suddenly becoming the organized, motivated version of herself? But then things started getting different. Our lazy Sunday mornings, which used to be my favorite part of the week, suddenly became planning sessions. Kayla would make coffee and pull out this notebook, wanting to map out our goals for the week, talk about what we wanted to accomplish, discuss how we were feeling about our relationship. At 7 in the morning, on a Sunday, I tried to go along with it because I could see how important it was to her. But honestly, I missed just lying in bed until noon, ordering terrible delivery food, and watching whatever garbage was on TV. That wasn't allowed anymore, apparently. Everything had to have intention behind it. Everything had to serve a purpose. The way she talked started changing too. Instead of just telling me about her day, she'd analyze it. Instead of complaining about her boss like a normal person, she'd talk about setting boundaries and advocating for her value. Instead of us just hanging out, she wanted to have meaningful conversations about our communication patterns and growth trajectories. What the hell is a growth trajectory, anyway? I started feeling like I was being studied. Like every response I gave was being filed away somewhere for future analysis. If I said work was fine, she'd ask why I wasn't more passionate about my career. If I said I was tired, she'd suggest we examine my sleep hygiene and stress management techniques. If I wanted to order pizza and watch a movie, she'd counter with a suggestion that we cook something healthy and have one of those meaningful conversations instead. The thing is, I like my job. I'm good at what I do. I work with decent people. I make enough money to be comfortable, and I don't have to take it home with me. Since when did that become a problem that needed solving? I wasn't climbing any corporate ladders or disrupting any industries, but I also wasn't miserable. That used to be enough. Our friends started noticing it too. When we'd go out for drinks, Kayla would steer every conversation toward people's goals and aspirations and 5-year plans. She'd analyze everyone's relationship dynamics and offer unsolicited advice about communication techniques. Mike pulled me aside one night and asked if everything was okay because Kayla seemed like she was conducting research instead of just hanging out. But the worst part was when she started suggesting I needed to work on myself too. She'd leave books on my nightstand about masculine energy and leadership principles. She'd forward me podcast episodes about maximizing potential and breaking through comfort zones. She even mentioned that maybe I should consider talking to someone about my own growth, since we needed to be developing in parallel if our relationship was going to work. Hold up. Since when did our relationship need work? I thought we were doing fine. Better than fine, actually. We never fought. We enjoyed each other's company. We had the same sense of humor. We wanted similar things out of life. Or at least, I thought we did. But apparently, being content wasn't enough anymore. Apparently, I was supposed to be constantly striving for something bigger, something better, something more. And when I couldn't summon that same level of enthusiasm for optimization and improvement, I started feeling like I was disappointing her just by being myself. The woman I fell in love with used to laugh at my stupid jokes and steal fries off my plate and fall asleep during movies we'd seen 100 times. I missed her. Even though she was right there next to me every night, I missed the version of her that didn't need to analyze everything, that could just be present without an agenda. But whenever I tried to bring it up, she'd tell me this was her becoming her best self, and didn't I want that for her? Of course I did. But what I really wanted was for her best self to still have room for the parts of our life that were already pretty damn good. You're right. That's not how guys typically express annoyance. Let me fix that to make Jacob's reactions more authentic to how men actually behave when they're frustrated.
The breakthrough came during my 6th session with Sarah when she asked me to really examine my relationship patterns. How Jacob and I handled conflict, how we made decisions together, whether we were actually growing in the same direction. It was like someone had handed me glasses I didn't know I needed. Take last Tuesday. I suggested we sit down and talk about where we wanted to be in 5 years. Simple question, right? Jacob literally groaned. Said he didn't want to turn our relationship into homework. When I explained that successful couples plan their future together, he said our future was fine the way it was, and why did everything need to be so complicated now? That's when it hit me. He wasn't just resistant to change, he was actively fighting it. Every time I tried to bring up something meaningful, he'd deflect with a joke or change the subject. When I suggested we stop ordering takeout every night and actually cook together, he said he liked our routine. When I mentioned that maybe we should be more social and hang out with people who inspired us, he said our friends were fine, and what was wrong with staying in? Nothing was wrong with staying in. But nothing was right with never wanting anything more either. The worst part was how he started pushing back on my changes. He'd make little comments about my morning routine, saying he missed the old lazy Kayla. He'd get quiet when I talked about something I'd learned in coaching. When I suggested he might benefit from reading this book about relationships, he just shrugged and said he didn't need a book to tell him how to be with me. But here's the thing, maybe he did. Because the way we communicated was surface level at best. We'd talk about work drama and what to watch on Netflix, but never about what we actually wanted from life. And when I tried to go deeper, he'd shut down completely. Sarah helped me understand that this wasn't just different communication styles. Jacob was threatened by my growth because it meant I was changing, and change scared him. He wanted the girlfriend who was content with mediocre everything. The one who didn't ask hard questions or want to plan for the future or expect him to be intentional about anything. I started paying attention to how I felt after our conversations. Frustrated, unheard, like I was speaking a foreign language he refused to learn. Meanwhile, when I talked to Emma or the women in my networking group, I felt energized and understood. Why should talking to my own boyfriend feel harder than talking to strangers? Last weekend was the final straw. I suggested we spend Sunday planning some goals for the next few months. Maybe save for a trip, or talk about moving to a bigger apartment, or just figure out what we wanted our lives to look like. Jacob said he didn't want to spend his weekend in a strategy session, that he worked all week and just wanted to relax. So I asked him point blank, when did he ever want to have these conversations? His answer? We don't need to plan each and everything, Kayla. Things will work out. Things will work out. Like our relationship was just something that happened to us instead of something we were actively creating together. And that's when I realized we weren't building anything. We were just existing in the same space, hoping for the best. Sarah asked me what I was getting from this relationship that I couldn't get from a good roommate. And I couldn't answer her. Because lately, that's all Jacob felt like. Someone I split bills with who occasionally made me laugh. I loved him, but I was starting to understand that love without growth, without shared vision, without the willingness to be uncomfortable together wasn't enough. At least not for me. Not anymore. The question was whether I was brave enough to do something about it.
I could see where this was all heading. Kayla had been building up to something for weeks, and I had this sinking feeling it wasn't going to be good news. Every conversation felt like a test I was failing. Every normal thing I did got analyzed through a new framework of what relationships should look like. I kept hoping she'd snap out of it, that we'd find our way back to normal, but deep down I knew we were heading for a crash. Still didn't make it any easier when it actually happened. That Sunday morning, I was making coffee, trying to enjoy what felt like it might be one of our last peaceful moments. She sat down at the kitchen table with that damn notebook again and said we needed to talk about our future. Not just talk, really examine whether we were compatible long-term. Compatible, like we were software or something. She started listing all these things we apparently needed to work on. Our communication styles, our life goals, our approach to personal growth. She said she'd been talking to Sarah about us, which, by the way, felt like a complete violation. I never agreed to be discussed in therapy sessions with some stranger who'd never even met me. Then came the real kicker. She thought we should take some space apart so we could both focus on individual growth and figure out what we really wanted. She said it like it was this reasonable, mature suggestion, but what I heard was my girlfriend telling me I wasn't good enough as is and needed to go fix myself before I could be with her. I finally snapped. Told her I was tired of everything about our relationship being treated like a problem that needed solving. That I missed the woman who used to laugh at my jokes instead of analyzing why I made them. That I didn't sign up to be someone's self-improvement project. You know what she said? That I was being defensive and resistant to growth. That my reaction proved we weren't aligned on fundamental values. That a truly supportive partner would want to evolve together instead of staying stagnant. Stagnant, because being happy with what we had apparently meant I was some kind of dead weight holding her back from her destiny. I asked her when exactly I'd become such a disappointment. When being a decent guy who loved her and wanted to build a life together stopped being enough. She got that look on her face, the one she'd been wearing a lot lately, like she was talking to a child who wasn't getting it. She explained that it wasn't about me being a disappointment. It was about us wanting different things. She wanted a partner who was passionate about personal development and conscious living and intentional relationships. Someone who would read the books she recommended and get excited about goal-setting sessions and vision boards. And I wanted a girlfriend who could still enjoy pizza and a movie without turning it into a discussion about mindful eating and quality time optimization. That's when I realized we weren't having a relationship conversation anymore. We were having a negotiation where she'd already decided the terms, and I could either accept them or leave. There was no middle ground where we could just be happy with what we had. Everything had to be elevated and optimized and analyzed. I told her I felt like I was losing her to some stranger's idea of what she should want. That I missed the woman who could be content, who didn't need everything to have deeper meaning, who could just exist with me without feeling like she was settling. But she was done listening at that point. Said I was proving her point about us not being compatible. That she needed someone who understood that settling for good enough wasn't actually good enough. That she deserved a partner who wanted to grow alongside her instead of holding her back. Holding her back, as if loving someone exactly as there was some kind of crime. That's when I knew it was over. Not because we didn't love each other, but because she decided that love wasn't enough unless it came with a development plan and quarterly reviews. She wanted a project partner, not a life partner. So I told her she was right. We weren't compatible anymore. But not because I was afraid of growth, because I refused to let anyone, including her, convince me that being content and grateful for what we had was some kind of character flaw.
I was devastated when Jacob moved out, but I was also convinced I'd made the right choice. Sarah helped me process the breakup, reminded me that sometimes people grow in different directions, and that I shouldn't settle for someone who couldn't match my commitment to personal development. I felt sad but also relieved. Finally, I could focus on becoming my best self without having to drag someone along who clearly didn't want to be there. The dating apps were brutal at first, but eventually I matched with Marcus. He was perfect on paper. Ambitious marketing manager, talked about personal development in his profile, had actually read some of the same books I was working through. Finally, someone who got it. The first few weeks were amazing. We'd have these incredible conversations about our goals and dreams, and what we wanted our lives to look like. He was already working with his own coach for career stuff, so he understood the value of investing in yourself. I thought I'd hit the jackpot, but then I started doing what felt natural, bringing the same intentionality to our relationship that I'd learned to bring to everything else. I suggested we do weekly check-ins about how things were going between us. Started sharing articles about conscious communication and healthy relationship dynamics. Bought us a couple's journal where we could track our growth together. Marcus got weird about it pretty fast. Started making jokes about feeling like he was in a psychology experiment. When I suggested we create some shared goals for the next few months, he said he just wanted to enjoy getting to know each other without turning it into a project. 3 months in, he ended it. Said I was trying to manage him like a business deal instead of just being with him. That he felt like I was more interested in optimizing our relationship than actually experiencing it. I was confused as hell. Wasn't this exactly what a growth-oriented person would want? Someone who cared enough to be intentional about building something meaningful together? Sarah helped me see that maybe Marcus just wasn't mature enough to handle a conscious relationship. That I needed to find someone who truly valued the work that goes into creating something special. So I kept dating. David seemed even more promising. Entrepreneur, posted on Instagram about mindfulness and personal development. We bonded over our shared commitment to living intentionally. This time I found my person. But the same thing happened. I introduced our weekly relationship reviews, suggested we read a book together about conscious partnerships, started analyzing our communication patterns and offering suggestions for how we could connect more deeply. David lasted 4 months before he told me he felt like he was being studied instead of loved. What the hell was wrong with these guys? Why did everyone seem to want mediocre, unconscious relationships where you just hoped things worked out instead of actively creating something amazing together? That's when Sarah asked me the question that changed everything. She wanted me to look at the common thread in these breakups. What was I doing in both relationships that might be coming across as controlling rather than caring? I'd turned into someone who couldn't experience a relationship without constantly trying to improve it. The worst part was realizing what I'd done to Jacob. He wasn't afraid of growth or commitment to staying stagnant. He was trying to protect something good from being dismantled and rebuilt according to someone else's blueprint. All those moments I thought he was being resistant, he was actually trying to preserve the natural intimacy and ease we built together. I'd taken a perfectly happy relationship and convinced myself it needed fixing because it didn't look like what my life coach thought relationships should look like. I'd lost someone who loved me exactly as I was because I'd become someone who couldn't love anyone without trying to change them first. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to create the perfect relationship, I'd become completely incapable of actually being in one. I'd learned all these tools and frameworks for connection, but I'd forgotten how to just connect. Slowly began to understand that the best parts of my relationship with Jacob had nothing to do with optimization or intention or growth plans. They were just two people who enjoyed each other's company, and that had been enough.